go. Uh, cool. So, welcome back, everyone, to Red Power Hour. As promised, we did it. I feel like we did a big build up to this, Elena. Like we hyped this up really, really hardcore. Today is the day. Today is the day we're recording our episode about Prey. This is Melanie Yazzie, one of the co-hosts of Red Power Hour. I'm going to hand it to you, Elena, to introduce yourself, and then to our two wonderful guests, also Red Nation comrades, who have been on Red Power Hour many times. But go ahead and introduce yourself, Elena.
I'm Elena Ortiz, calling in from Ogapoge, otherwise known as Santa Fe, aka Mordor. And yes, we did hype this up a lot because I've been looking forward to this movie for months, and then when it finally came out, I was not disappointed. There were some things that I had an issue with, but for the most part, it's pretty badass.
Ubeak I can go next. Singitamu, everybody. My name is Justine Teba. I'm calling in from Cockbo Winge, aka Santa Clara Pueblo. I'm in my childhood home at my grandpa's house. Really excited for this one. Have a couple hot takes, maybe, and I promise to deliver how many out of 10 sheep I rate this movie by the end of it. I'm still trying to come up with a solid rating. Go ahead, Kiley.
Yeah, my name is Kiley. Um, Calling in from Teba territory, aka Albuquerque, New Mexico. Also, really excited to be on this. I'm always excited to record with RPH actually, because everyone on here is so badass. um, but yeah, in terms of Prey, I'm also I have some criticisms of it, but overall, I enjoyed it.
Nice. I think it's like I mean, as we've said before on Red Power Hour, it makes me really happy when it's a bunch of just like Indigenous women throwing down and giving analysis. There's a lot of dude bro hot takes out in the world. Who needs more of that, you know? So I'm excited about this roundtable. And it's fitting, right? Because Prey, the protagonist of Prey, is an Indigenous woman, which is something we should definitely talk about. That was something that struck me about the film. Okay, my first impression, I gave it 10 out of 10 sheeps. Okay, like I feel as our comrade Kyan said, I think I'm ready to die on that hill still. I might go down to like 9 out of 10 sheeps. I watched it again this morning in preparation for recording this episode. And I was like, oh, there's just some stuff here that's like a little annoying, but we can talk about it. And then maybe we can come back around by the end of the episode to see how many sheeps we give it, as Justine said. I forgot to tell everyone I'm calling in from Minnesota Makoche. I think I said that wrong last time. I'm really sorry to all of our Chitishakoi relatives. And it's raining really hard, so you might hear rain and or the thunder beings in the background here. They've been celebrating. They've been celebrating a lot in the last few days. There's been so much moisture up here. I don't come from a people of moisture or like water. I mean, I have a water clan like on my knowledge side, but the water up here is like on a whole other level. So it's really a blessing. It's very beautiful. So I apologize if there's noise in the background. But yeah, let's just crack into it. We don't have an agenda. I think we're all very passionate. I mean, I feel very passionately about this movie. Um, Really quickly, so Prey came out on Hulu. It was not released in theaters. It's the fifth installment of the Predator series, which for the most part is like a terrible, it's like bad. I guess the first Predator with Arnold Schwarzenegger was like 30 years ago, was like kind of a decent movie. Predator versus Alien had some hype around it. But this movie is like interesting because it's like in the Predator family. It's like a fifth installment of the Predator series. But actually, I don't really think the movie's about Predator. I mean, we can have a conversation about this. It's about other things that are like very indigenous. Um, and yeah, it didn't come out in movie theaters, which I thought was interesting. It came out on Hulu. And Hulu reported as of last week that Prey is its most watched TV or movie premiere ever in the history of the streaming app, which means that it's like very, very popular. It's probably being watched internationally. And it's been very positively reviewed by just audience members, including non native people. Um, it has like a 90, 89, or a 90% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which I don't know if that counts for much because people rate things very strangely on Rotten Tomatoes. But also, like, Indigenous film reviewers and social media has been very favorable. There's two versions of the movie, right? There's one that's entirely in the Comanche language because the story centers on a Comanche village, and the protagonist is a young Comanche woman. And then there's a second version that's in English. I've only watched the English version on Hulu. Justine, I believe you watched the Comanche version. So it'd be interesting to talk about language. There's so much to talk about. I'll probably talk a lot about gender, because that seems to be huge, like a huge theme in the movie. But yeah, I just wanted to give some stats about the movie. So it's been out for what, like 2 weeks? 2 weeks exactly. It was released 2 weeks ago. Exactly. Uh, Really quickly, the movie takes place in 1719. The year 1719 says in the northern Great Plains. It kind of looks like it was shot like in the Canadian Rockies or something like that, like Saskatchewan or Alberta or a place like that. Did the Comanche go that high up? I don't really know, but I really loved the movie. Like, both times I watched it, even though I have criticisms, I think it's kind of a groundbreaking movie for a lot of different reasons. But I'm gonna open it up to all of you to give your perspectives on that, and then we'll just go.
I agree with you. Totally groundbreaking. I also watched it twice. The second time I watched it in Comanche. But the first thing that struck me about it was that for the first time, I was watching a movie where the central characters were Indigenous, but their indigeneity and the fact that it was a Comanche village was not the star of the show. So they were human beings living their lives in 1719 when this crazy alien arrives and starts eating things and people, and their being Comanche wasn't separate from the storyline. It was written into the storyline. So you have movies like Dances with Wolves, our favorite one, where Costner worked so hard to show how empathetic he was to Indigenous people. And you could see that strain in that film and how bad it was. And then you see films like, all the old Westerns with John Wayne, where you have all of these horrible tropes and, people in red face and all of that. And that was like all you saw. That was the spectrum that you got in films, was the searchers through Dances with Wolves. But you never really got a film done by Native people about a Native community that didn't include either the savage or this idea of the noble but disappearing Indian. And that's what I loved so much about it. And like Melanie, there was a couple of things that I had issues with, but for the most part, a strong Indigenous woman, like choosing a woman as the central character, was brilliant, and she was brilliant. The Amber Midthunder who plays Naru is just brilliant, and it's a very physical role that she plays, and obviously she trained really hard because she, like, spoiler alert here, she takes home the head of an alien, but she kicks everybody's ass, even when her brother, who's like big time war chief, he gets his ass kicked, and she doesn't.
One of the most frustrating things about the movie is watching yet another Native woman not being listened to. Because, yeah, she used her brains and she used her broad knowledge base to defeat a predator. That was I mean, I was even watching it the second time, I was at the edge of my seat. Kiley and I got to watch Prey during our delegation to Hawaii that we just got back from like last week. And everybody, we were with Oahu water protectors, and all of us were like, oh crap, like we can't wait to watch Prey, like everybody's talking about it, we're gonna see spoilers. We're so busy every freaking day during our delegation that we were like, Prey was just like on the back burner. No, everybody couldn't wait to see it. And then finally, on our last day at the house we were staying at, we all got to watch it. We watched it in Comanche first, and then I watched it again with my grandparents in English, and I had like a little bit of different experience with that. So I feel like I got to like see more because I didn't get to because I wasn't like reading the whole time, you know. So, but I thought it was really cool. And actually before this, I watched a 16-minute YouTube video, so you don't have to, about the Predator timeline. I'm sorry about that. So I watched a 60-minute YouTube video, so you don't have to, talking about the entire Predator timeline, and it goes as far back as like when you first see the Predators on planet Earth. This goes back to like a whole like yoded out like ancient aliens in Antarctica, like if y'all remember that from Alien versus Predator. And when I looked at the rest of the timeline, it kind of made like where Prey is, or where when and where Prey takes place, kind of like I don't know. I might have to dock a sheep for this one because so let's go back. So we start in this like ancient alien like Antarctica like civilization where they are the predators are worshipped as like gods or whatever, and they don't attack the people or the humans that they're engaging with back then because they're being worshipped, and they only hunt hunters pretty much. And then the next place, so then like the next place in the timeline where Predator shows up on Earth again that we know about is the movie Prey. And what changes is like they start hunting like natives, and because like I feel like I don't know, so they start hunting natives because like they recognize them as like hunters and like people being worthy of being like hunted. And I'm kind of like, is this to say something about Native people like being savage, savage enough to be hunted by the predator? I don't know. We'll get into that later. And then after that is 1904 when the people go to Antarctica to look for their alien technology or whatever. After that's between 1945 and 1982. And it's mentioned that the predator was spotted in Hiroshima, Cambodia, and Beirut. And then next would be in 87 in Guatemala, when that's when Arnold comes into play. And that's when like the original Predator takes place. After that is in 97 in LA during a heat wave and like violence. I don't know. I remember they're like fighting the cops in the streets or something. And then after that, it's 04 during the Arctic hunt. And then the franchise gets kind of wonky. Even the person on YouTube was like, I don't know what's going on there. But something, I don't know. I mean, I'm not like big into the lore, but I think there's more to be said about like where the predator's going and who the predator's like interacting with, because like it's hunting like the most like it's hunting like the best hunter or whatever, and then it's going to places where like US imperialism is happening and like choosing like like it's going after like people who are like violent or whatever. And oh, that was another thing. And then tied into all of this after Arnold defeats the predator, I guess in the next movie somewhere they give that intelligence to the IDF in this predator universe. So there's that. Anyways, I just wanted to go over that real quick because it kind of gave me like a broader perspective of like where prey fits into like this like storyline.
Oh my gosh. Thanks, Justine. I thought about doing something like that in prep for this, but I don't know. I kind of was just thinking, like, where is it going to lead? Like, do I really want to go down that rabbit hole? So thanks for doing that for us all. Um, so there are a lot of things that I love about Prey. Okay, so I watched the original Predator. I remember watching Predator as like a kid and just, I was like a huge fan and just like nerding out on it. But now watching it as an adult, there are some things that just like make me cringe. But what I love about Prey is that it sort of corrects everything that was wrong in Predator in terms of like Billy, the character around Billy, and how in Predator there's all this hype around him as being like native. He's a tracker and he's like stoic, just like warrior, and he like rips off his medicine pouch to stand up to Predator. But what I didn't like was that with Billy, he was the only one that we saw get his spine and skull like ripped out of him, and all the other characters we did not see that. So it kind of just made me think like, ugh, like like a trophy, like that was like a trophy killing, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is like a white guy like playing Indian, rather than like we don't get to see Billy use any of his like his talents or his knowledge to defeat Predator, but instead we see Arnold like he makes a bow and arrow, he puts mud on his face like war paint. And it's just so like it's so bad. So I love that in Prey we get to see Native people using their intelligence, like their knowledge. We get to see them because, like, she uses plants. Like, I love the use of plants as like a weapon, and also, like, even her dog, like her relationship with her dog, her puppy. Like, they're both just totally in sync, and her dog is also a weapon, and he also knows how to like defeat Predator. um and then I also love the use of sign language. I love the music, although some parts of the music are kind of reminiscent of Last of the Mohicans. Like, right?
Totally. I thought the
Yeah.
same thing. The exact same chords. I want to talk more about
Yes.
that, but
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Because I caught that too, and I was like, wait a minute, this sounds really familiar. um, but yeah, and I just love how the music is placed on certain like key moments, or like certain like moments of uh like empowerment, I guess, or when she's like figuring out how to defeat Predator, but also like figuring out herself as like a hunter, or like um someone who's just like more than like her gender. But we'll get into gender later. um but yeah, and I just like that it's just very smart. Like, I think oftentimes, like Elena was saying, in movies about Native people, we're often like dehumanized or portrayed as like we don't know what we're doing, or we are not as like advanced as like civil society. And so I think with Prey it completely like twists that narrative, and we're actually like, nah, like our knowledge can withstand, and it also can like defeat like advanced technology, or yeah. let's see, what else was I going to say that I liked about it? Oh, I also kind of paid attention to her relationship with her brother, and I, in a way, I appreciate that relationship, or like the model of their relationship, which is they're not so much in competition with each other. I mean, like they tease each other. But I mean, if you're from a native community, you're going to get teased. Like that's how you show you love another person. But I guess in a way that's like that stuck out, what stuck out to me was that he supported her in some instances. Like he didn't really um like condescend to her. Like he kind of helped uh direct her journey, I guess, to wanting to be like a hunter. And he wasn't like, he didn't say, "Oh, you can't do that because like you're a woman," or like, "No, like stay in the teepee." Like he didn't do any of that, but he kind of was just trying to support her in like honing in like her focus, or her skills, because he saw that she was capable of being like a hunter, or like being like a warrior, or like to his like status, I guess. But I'll stop there. Yeah.
He was a day one believer in her. Like nobody believed in her, not even her own mom, and he like from the get-go believed in her.
And that's and that leads me to the I guess the one thing that really bothered me, because I agree with what Kylie and Justine just said. When the other young men went to find her, and they said, "Your brother sent us to find you," and they actually manhandled her, and they knocked her down and were dragging her. And I thought, yeah, that doesn't follow with the respect that it didn't follow in any on any level. Like if she is the sister of the war chief, she would have been treated with respect. And actually, as a woman in an indigenous community, she would have been treated with respect. So that that manhandling of her, that abuse of her, it stuck out at me as not being in line with the rest of the movie. Like they wouldn't have abused her in that way, I don't think. Um, and it kind of, if it hadn't been so glaring to me, I was thinking, yeah, this is how a male filmmaker might treat this, um, who is not indigenous. Um, I was surprised that they let that scene go. I mean, I could see them trying to get her. Her brother was worried about her safety, but to beat her like that, I thought was not appropriate in the film, and it kind of like sent up white flags. Like this is a patriarchal treatment of a woman, and not really indigenous.
I have a lot to
Yep.
say about that. Can I go next, please? I'm dying.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say one thing: minus one sheep.
Okay, I don't think that warrants a minus one sheep, and this is why. Because, okay, so I'm going to link this back to like what Kylie and Justine said. So, like, the movie trolls the Predator universe, it trolls itself, right? And so it's trolling two different things. It's trolling stupid movies that have been made about Native people, specifically Last of the Mohicans, Dances with Wolves, and The Revenant, actually. So this movie takes place in the same time period as The Revenant. Y'all remember Leonardo DiCaprio, like, sleeps, he gets mauled by a bear and then he like sleeps inside a horse. You remember this movie? It came out about a decade ago. um so it trolls like westerns that have been made, or like movies about this time period that have centered indigenous people, but like in the way that Elena's describing. But it also trolls the Predator universe because, for this, the reason that you explained from the first movie, right? It's trying to correct the cultural appropriation and the racism from the original movie. But also, the movie isn't called Predator, it's called Prey. It's literally the opposite of to be a predator is to prey upon, but to be preyed upon is to be prey. And so the movie like turns everything on its head. And in a way, like as I was watching it, I was like, oh, this movie isn't actually about Predator at all. It's like interesting. It's like Predator's just kind of like there being an asshole the whole time. And I mean, I'm going to talk more about like why Predator is like such a mega asshole. It's like a toxic masculinity on steroids figure. But so Predator's just kind of there, but Predator is only one type of predator in the entire movie. In fact, the movie is about multiple types of predators and multiple kinds of predation. And like there's a reason why there's this like indigenous woman who's at the center of all of this, because she is preyed upon by all of these figures in the movie. And even if that doesn't like sit well, that there was like a commentary about how these young native men, they're being incredibly sexist. They make a joke about her cooking at one point instead of hunting. They like physically assault her and abuse her, right? Like that's messed up to see that happening. I know that there was commentary online about how people were really not cool with that, like in line with what you were saying earlier, Elena. But I don't think that that is like an outlier in the movie, because it just seemed like there were so many different types of predators, and that like men and anything that could be coded as masculine, including the predator, including the fur traders, the French fur traders and fur trappers, and even some of the indigenous men are all coded as predators. I think the indigenous men kind of move back and forth between everyone moves back and forth actually between being prey and predators, because ultimately predator, she slays his ass. So he becomes prey himself. But it's like it's just like I think the movie is it's very like of this moment, and the movie wasn't written by women. I'm pretty sure the movie was written by a couple of white dudes. I could be wrong, but like, and then there was a lot of indigenous input. Jane Myers, who is a well-known Comanche woman, been in the film industry for a very long time, based out of Santa Fe, and has done work in LA, provided like a lot of consultation on this film, to get like the references to Comanche culture right. But she's also an indigenous woman. And that my understanding is that the indigenous actors also had a lot to say about kind of how scenes were unfolding, how the language was being used, how people were dressed and interacting and stuff like that. So there's an indigenous touch to this film, even though it wasn't written by indigenous people, that I think is maybe like I'm reading too much into this, or maybe not. But all I'm saying is that like 2022, like an indigenous woman is a protagonist of a film that's mostly just been about like dudes, like Arnold Schwarzenegger, just like dudes with big muscles, just like killing stuff, which is basically what the Predator franchise has been in the past. But this movie completely turns it on its head. And it's kind of like it's a weirdly feminist Predator movie that like actually completely decenters Predator. Because I was thinking the whole movie, like I actually did not care what Predator was doing whatsoever. I was just no, you don't. I mean, you were enraptured by her, by the main character.
Where he was at all times, but you didn't actually see him that much. And it's really interesting that you say that, because I do think like Naru as a character like literally subverted everything that came before her. And then even through the course of the movie, when you see her in the beginning, she's somewhat like she's determined, but she's still kind of passive. But as she is, as you put it, Melanie, preyed upon, first by being the one who recognizes that this is not a mountain lion, right? This is definitely not a mountain lion. And then she gets teased, and people give her grief because they tell her she doesn't know what she's talking about, and then she gets preyed upon by her fellow tribes people, the men, the native men. The more she gets preyed upon, then she gets put in a fucking cage by the French fur trappers. Like the more, yeah. And then you see like it's almost instantaneous that she flips that switch and everyone else becomes prey and she becomes the predator. Like, to the ultimate end, which is that she's the one who ends up killing him. And so she completely subverts that predator prey dichotomy. It's actually really cool.
It is really cool, especially compared to the original Predator movie. I watched it last night. I hadn't seen it. Like, I'd seen maybe bits and pieces like as a kid, but I never watched it in like one sitting. Oh my god, that was the most like misogynistic like trash like I'd ever seen. There was jokes about Kitty Meow Meow twice, and then like it's just so funny like how like patriarchy is just about man loving, because like it's just like all these like muscly dudes just like being muscly, and they're gonna go into the jungle and like shoot guns and then get in the chopper like and like um they they didn't do that. I really appreciate the sentiment of like how Prey really like undid all of that and like put it on its head. I just wanted to like comment that because I saw that, and then I watched Prey again. It's really, yeah, okay. I'm gonna put the sheep back into the score.
Sorry, I got really aggressive with that perspective. I didn't mean to get so aggressive. I'm just
You
saying
got
that
really
like
aggressive about that sheep.
pred so what you were saying, like Predator, like man must kill, man must lift heavy thing. Like literally Predator, like all of his alien technology, he's like pointy thing, heat register must kill. Like he's literally just a basic man. Am I wrong? It's so interesting how in this movie, like Predator is coded as a man, super masculine, right? Very muscly, big, like physically bigger than much bigger than her. He's like 4 times her size or whatever. And he's basically just like he's like a symbol of toxic masculinity and just like patriarchy and misogyny on steroids. And then she just like shoots a flaming arrow into the heart of patriarchy, which I think, don't you feel like Predator just kind of represents that in this movie? That's why I'm saying this movie is very much like of its time, like a feminist turn. The year of the Indigenous woman, right, was 2019. Like this movie is like so interesting. It'll be interesting to see like what people think 20 or 30 years from now about this movie. But this movie definitely reflects the historical moment. Because Predator, even though he's like an alien and he's supposed to be like more advanced or whatever, because he's an alien, presumably, who comes from like a more advanced civilization than these native people, these Comanche people in 1719. Predator's just like a basic ass patriarch who like belongs in the past. Essentially, right? Like Predator has no future. They really shouldn't make any more Predator movies after this.
No, really, that's exactly what happened. Because when I was watching that video about the timeline, the further you get into the future with patriarchy, the more like the story like twists itself up and like becomes like just unwatchable basically. And that's because patriarchy has no future, so they were forced to go back in time.
Whoa. Oh my god. I did not think of it that way. Like, I appreciate that analysis because, like, I was thinking more, I guess, maybe in a literal sense, because the part where she's beaten by the men, uh, I was thinking like, oh, like this implies, misogyny always existed within native communities, and like, I was kind of thinking of it from that framework. And because there's also something too about that scene where they're all killed that I also did not like, because since prior to all of them being killed by Predator, we see them abusing a native woman, And then so when they get killed, it's almost like as the audience, we're meant to cheer on Predator to kill native people, you know? So I guess that's what was bothering me and why I was like, okay, I'm docking like 3 sheep. Like um not to be like super morbid or anything, but um yeah, because I was just kind of thinking like, there's somebody out there who enjoyed that scene a little too much, and it's really graphic. Um so I guess that's why I was kind of like, meh, like I like this movie, but it's still like okay. And then in terms of um the feminist perspective of this movie, I love that it does carry that analysis, but also there's parts of it that I didn't agree with. Like um we still see women in uh what's the word I'm looking for? We still see them portrayed as invisible, or they're not out in the world. Like her mom is still in the TP doing docile things, like, the plants and the cooking, and that's reserved as her space. But when I saw that, I was thinking, wouldn't she be outside, like with other aunties, like in a circle, like doing, like being out um, in the world instead of just like being this kind of almost like uh invisible figure to the public or like to the world? Because like I don't know, just something about that kind just like bothered me just a little bit, because it implies like there was like a binary, and then her mother's disapproval of her wanting to hunt, and she's cutting the fish, and so her mom kind of gives her this look of like what are you doing? you know but I think like the implication that there is a binary, um it kind of just feeds into, I guess, like that there was like a binary to overcome in the first place. But I think, within native communities, like during that time, it wouldn't have been something to overcome. Like, I mean, if she wanted to be a hunter, she could be a hunter, but like it wouldn't be like an issue. Like she would, I mean, of course she would have to learn, like protocols to hunt and like the responsibilities that come with that, but it wouldn't have been something that she would need to prove like for her gender. Is that clear? I don't know. Like I kind of went on a tangent, but I guess that's what I was thinking of. But I love the analysis of like there's different variations of prey or like being preyed upon.
I totally hear what you're saying, Kylie. Like the fact that she wanted to be a hunter, like in an indigenous community in 1719, that likely would not have been an issue. She would have just been, that would have been her choice, and she would have done it. But the idea that she had to fight for it and fight for approval to do it, um, seems like that was constructed by the white filmmakers, and and like it or not, um, the only way to change that is to actually have a native person direct it. So that was my only criticism of sort of that is yes, the indigenous actors were great. I thought Naru was great. Her brother was great. The only thing that would have upped the ante a little bit for me is if it had actually been written by Native people and directed, because we still have that white male gaze on her, and she's the only, like, we saw her mother a little bit when they were in the teepee, her mother doing domestic things and signaling her disapproval. But there's really no other female characters. I mean, you see their background; they're all background. They're not ever in the forefront. Whereas even the boys had speaking roles, and before they all got slaughtered, they actually spoke, and they were humanized. The other women characters were not; they were all background. So that the power to do that comes from the director, and unless we have more Native people, women, directing films, it's always going to be like that. So I'd love to see someone take on a film, not Prey or Predator, but a film with a female protagonist, a physical protagonist, like in a movie where she has to be a warrior. And I'd like to see how that looks. The one thing that I thought was really sweet at the end of the movie, when she comes and she's carrying the big predator head, and she walks back into her village, and the old man, who you can sort of assume is a leader or chief, he's the one who made her brother the war chief at the beginning of the movie. And it's never really spoken, but you assume that that she is made war chief because she's killed the predator. And there's one shot, and it's split second, of a little girl, and you get her face, and she's looking at Naru, and she's like, wow, women can do this. Like this, a woman has just done this. And that to me was like, that was a beautiful shot. But the rest of it, I think you just don't see any female characters other than background dressing.
Yeah, no, point taken. I was just thinking as were talking, like, if you took out, so it's right, it's like it's a narrative invention of these white men who've written and directed this film to center kind of like the feminist through line of like the girl empowerment kind of story, which don't get me wrong, I love a good girl empowerment story. I'm a basic feminist, like I admit it. This is why I loved this movie. Like, even though some of the things like about indigeneity were off, like, and then I also don't appreciate seeing Indigenous people getting trophy killed in a film. Like, please, we've seen that in every movie like ever made about Indigenous people. We don't need more Indigenous people dying. And actually, the sexism and the misogyny, the presumed sexism and misogyny that she faces from her brother's friends, right? These dudes, these young dude hunters from her village. If we didn't have that storyline, and like also if those dudes didn't get killed by Predator, the movie would have still been fabulous, right? It just wouldn't have had like the anti-Indian carnage. You actually don't need, it's like you don't need to be so heavy-handed and trying to prove that she's like trying to overcome something because of her gender, right? And that, like you said, Kiley, like if there were more Indigenous women written into the story in the village, like the story would have still been incredibly powerful, but it didn't need that stuff, which is, again, I think just to serve the storyline of her kind of like girl empowerment and like rising kind of the plot or whatever of the film. So I totally agree with you all. I did want to say one more thing about why I hate Predator so much. But like the actual dude, the thing that is Predator. So I was like looking online at like reviews, and people were like obsessed with Predator. There's like a new actor, I guess, who was playing Predator, and then people were like Predator universe, and I was like, this movie isn't about Predator. Who cares about Predator? Like, Predator not only is just like the epitome of toxic masculinity, Predator is like symbolizes patriarchy that has no future, and so she kills the patriarchy. But Predator is like, he's just showing up on like an imperial frontier in like early 18th century, I don't know, the Great Plains, and here Nauru is already having to deal with these fucking colonizers, right? The fur trappers, who were notoriously violent. They would kidnap and murder and sell Native women. Comrade Nick Estes wrote an entire chapter in Our History is the Future about this very thing that happened with his people. And this movie takes place like amongst like Plains people, including Nick's people. And so trappers were notorious for trading women the same way that they traded furs. And, they took the hides off of buffalo, for example. Like, the scene that you see is actually straight out of Dances with Wolves, then it's plopped into this movie Prey. So it's another reference to like the Great Westerns or whatever, Great Western movies that have portrayed Native people in the past. But what I'm trying to say is that like Predator's motivation is just pure trophy. It's just a game. It's like sport killing. Predator's just an Indian killer in this movie. And I'm like, well, why do we have to watch a movie of yet another colonizer, essentially, like being plopped down into a context where Naru, who's a young indigenous woman, is already having to face, these other colonizers, as are all of the indigenous people in her village, because, settler colonialism is beginning. The expansion of the so-called New World is happening. Like there's these incredibly violent kind of front men of like imperial aggression, like these fur traders who are out here literally preying on indigenous women. Does she really need to face and then to defeat another predator or another type of predator in this context that is already extremely violent because of like how colonialism was unfolding during this period of history? Like that I also just did not appreciate. That also felt like a very like white dude or like a non-native kind of take or an approach to this. And then she has to and then she has to conquer this predator. And what's interesting is like this predator isn't motivated by capitalism. He's not motivated by land. He literally just shows up because he just wants to kill things and like take out their skulls and spines. And I'm like, if you actually just like took Predator out of the movie, it would have been a better movie. I guess is what I'm saying. I think Predator is like a supreme shit ass and did not need to be this movie that's about this powerful indigenous woman trying to survive through her like ingenuity and her strength in like a colonial frontier context. I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, there's no Predator without white people.
Well, and then the scene with the French fur trappers and with the buffalo, literally out of Dances with Wolves, and just even the way they were skinned was Dances with Wolves. But it was interesting that they threw that in there because I think a lot of people were assuming that it was the predator that did that. And the first thing that came into my mind is, oh no, this is a different kind of predator. This is colonization as predation, because that's exactly what French fur trappers, English fur trappers, the nascent American society in the 1800s with the railroads, every single type of white person that came into onto Turtle Island did that exact same thing. And it, killing the buffalo and doing it in mass quantities, committing genocide against Comrade Buffalo was a way of committing genocide against Native people. And so that's a different kind of predation. And the way they threw that in there as sort of a subtext to the larger predator. So this thing that, for all intents and purposes, is like this uber predator, but he only shows up every few hundred years or whatever, and he shows up in one specific area, and he sucks the skulls and spines out of a few people or beings that he feels are worthy adversaries, and then he leaves. But like the predation that is illustrated by the French fur trappers was actually genocide, and it actually remained, and it actually still remains. So like having that illustrated in such a way, like they did in Dances with Wolves, it's like that's really the real predator. That's really the real predation.
Yeah, and that predator gets to just like drop in and then sport hunt and trophy kill and then leave. Like that's why he's a shit ass, and I'm glad he died. Glad she killed him in the movie. What's interesting is that the movie's in the Predator universe, but he's not the protagonist. She is in the film, and he's actually the narrative. He's the plot device. When historically, Native people have been the background plot device for male protagonists in films. And so I kind of loved that he was just a plot device. It's kind of an afterthought. But yeah, how dare Predator? drop down in that context when she already has so much on her plate.
For
And
real.
yet she still fucking killed him. Like, okay, I got a lot of shit going on in my life. You know, I'm trying to be a hunter. The dudes are against me. My mother's looking at me somehow. And I'm still fucking going out and killing this thing because my dog is with me and I need to save my dog. Right? So.
Nobody. Women of Red Nation. Just kidding. Not being listened to by freaking native men and settler men and predator men's and, you know,
Alien men's, all men's.
all men's. I know.
Alien men's, all men's.
Yeah. Oh no,
What's the
for
title
real.
of the show?
What's the title?
Alien men's, all men's. Or like Native women not being listened to.
And see what happens when you don't listen? You guys better watch it, man. I'm telling you, she's gonna use plants and your head is gonna be on a platter. And the dog doesn't like you either.
Aw, Res Puppy, best supporting actor.
It just goes to show res dogs can survive anything.
That's right.
For real. Aw.
And isn't the saying that like dogs are a man's best friend? Isn't that the saying? And I was like, not in this movie.
Oh.
The dog is feminist.
So in the Pueblos, we actually dance Comanche because they helped us a long time ago, and I've danced Comanche a few times. And I'm saying this because I just want to put it on the table. Therefore, it's ethical for me to cosplay Naru and nobody else other than Comanche people. It's actually traditional for me to cosplay Comanche people.
Oh my god.
It's true.
No, but no, I saw on a native comic book group on Facebook, somebody was all like, "Is it ethical for non-natives to cosplay Naru?" No, it's not.
No,
It is
and
for
you
me,
actually you have to be from the northern Pueblos too. I don't think the southern Pueblos do Comanche dance. But
I've danced Comanche in Tisuki and Santa Clara, so I want to talk to a Comanche person about what they thought of Prey. I'm gonna find one this weekend at the Pathways Festival at Buffalo Thunder. It's a nice alternative to Indian Market going on.
I want to find that one Comanche. No, sorry to any of our Comanche listeners. There's a bunch of non-Comanche native people giving our breakdown. I would actually really love to hear. We don't have any Comanche relatives in the Red Nation, unfortunately.
But Jane is going to be there.
Yet. It's true.
Jane Myers is going to be at Pathways. And so is Amber Mid-Thunder. And Beavers, the guy who played the brother. What is his name? I think his name is Dakota Beavers.
I think during this podcast recording at 1:00, they were showing, having a showing of Prey at the Pathways Festival with all of these people. Yeah. I'm gonna find them. I'm gonna drive. I'm here in the north. I'm gonna find them.
Watch out!
I'm gonna get them on the podcast.
Comanches in one place. No,
in fact,
that would actually be great.
Yeah, listeners, please help us find them or help them find us, because we would love to talk to them about this.
Can I say something really quickly about the fact that this movie's about Comanche? Like, I saw a review of this, but also I'm not sure if people know, but like, you know how Diné people or Navajo people are overrepresented in racist popular culture stereotypes about Native people, as are like Lakota folks. Often so are Comanche. So are Comanches. Like Tonto, I think was supposed to be Comanche from the Lone Ranger and Tonto. And there's a whole kind of subgenre in American history that's centered on I don't even need to explain this. I've talked shit about this before, but it's basically like white dude historians who write histories about indigenous people during the type of time periods, like the early colonial period, the early American period, essentially like when this movie is taking place. And there's this like notion that the Comanches were an empire because white historians were really obsessed with like proving that genocide wasn't a real thing and that like native people had agency, you know, in colonial encounters with settlers of various kinds, sometimes European, then later on American, and that we too were empires for a certain period of time. So haha, we couldn't have been victims of colonization because we had agency, because we were empires. But there's this whole thing that centers Comanches, treating the Comanches as empires and whatever, right? And so, like, the representation of Comanche people, both within academic history and also like popular history vis a vis like film and television, is like incredibly racist. It like has not been written by Comanches. Like, you know, it hasn't centered Comanche voices. It certainly hasn't centered Comanche women. Almost all of these stories are written about men. And so the movie is actually kind of a big deal in terms of like changing the way that Comanche people are just talked about or represented, or like the history is portrayed. So that was something else that I wanted to point out that I found was really striking. I'm The fact that the movie centers Comanche is like a really big deal.
I totally agree. And I also want to express that I think it's racist as fuck that this wasn't released in theaters and this was just like a streaming release. Like what the like it was beautifully shot. That entire movie. It was probably the best shot film of all of the Predator movies. And they didn't put in the theaters because it centers native people and in a way that isn't like.
But you know what? Karma. Seriously, because it's the highest watched Hulu film ever. So karma, motherfuckers. If you'd released this in the theaters, you would have made gazillions of dollars. Um, the other thing about what Melanie said about the Comanches, the other thing that was striking about this film is that it's about a Comanche community without horses. So the Comanches almost always are depicted as, and they were, of course, phenomenal horse people. They were phenomenal riders. They, even in the days of Wild Bill, the riders who performed in Wild Bill Hickok's, a lot of them were Comanches because they were just such amazing riders. But this is a film that takes a very simple approach um, to showing a Comanche community in its like in a very peaceful place. Here are these people, and they're living in this village, and they're hunting, and they're gathering, and they're together, and they're not out, hunting buffalo on horseback like Dances with Wolves was infamous for spending millions of dollars shooting CGI buffalo and regular buffalo and all of these riders. And this was just, these are a people with all of their flaws and all of their heroics. These are just a people. And it wasn't centering them as the great lords of the plains that white historians always referred to them as.
Yeah, like the aggressors, like the reason why they were considered an empire for a period of time was because they were able to kill people, like the marauders and shit like that. Yeah, this did not play on those tropes at all.
You know what's interesting? This might be reaching a little bit, but uh the success of Prey on Hulu versus like it being released in theaters, it makes me wonder if um because I mean, people in Hollywood had to have seen like how successful it is, right? And then we just had like the Academy issue an apology to Sasheen Littlefeather. And so it makes me wonder like, oh, they must like from the success of this movie, it's like showing maybe like it's showing the shift in how people think or like support native people and native actors, and we have res dogs, that's like a whole like native production. And I'm wondering if they're like shaking in their boots a little bit and they're just like, oh, we got to correct things, like um but it's just funny to me, and if they really want to be um I don't know, apologetic, or they really want to show respect to native people, because we're coming up in the like film industry, is like they should just pull all of John Wayne's movies, like burn that shit. Denounce him as like the greatest actor ever. Like I want to see all of those films just like burned.
They know it's
Burn in
coming,
hell.
and that's why and that's why they're not like giving us like the full acknowledgement that we deserve, like having like a huge like, you know, this movie would have made millions on the release weekend. They are shaking in their boots. Natives can tell their own stories and their own histories now.
Yeah. Gone are the days where you had Ricardo Montalban playing Dull Knife, and I mean, those movies are so horrific in so many ways, on so many levels. And it's not just John Wayne. It's like Clint Eastwood needs to be, well, he's already the Walking Dead. He just needs to keel over. Like someone just needs to push him a little bit with a finger, and he needs to go down, down, down. And you know, I was having these fantasies like after I read that the Academy had issued an apology to Sacheen Littlefeather, and I thought, oh, so they should invite her to the next Academy Awards, and I want to see her come out with a giant land back sign, you know, on the stage. But we need female Indigenous directors, and we need to like correct. There needs to be a course correction with what's going on. I mean, I love Reservation Dogs, you know, like beyond love. I mean, it's like such a great thing to watch. And I just get so excited when it's Wednesday and I get to watch it. But, and I respect all those people, but we need to have more women directors. We need to have women behind the camera. Like women need to be directing those narratives. And as writers, absolutely, but also as directors, because too much centers the male gaze, and the male gaze is tiresome from white men, and it's tiresome with Native men as well. Like it needs to be female. We need to have women directors and women writers, and we need to see something come out of all of this, like all of this Prey and Rutherford Falls and Reservation Dogs. Like we need to see women stepping up and saying, we're going to control this narrative, we're going to direct this narrative, because that's how we're going to get the stories told that we want and that are important, and that, you know, aren't centered around weird shit like aliens coming and killing everybody.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you know, we did a review of 1883, the TV show 1883. I don't know, a few months ago. It was a bonus episode. We haven't done a breakdown of Yellowstone. I can't fucking stomach that show, but gonna have to do it at some point. Right? These like Kevin Costner in like the Kevin Costner industrial complex. And so those are Yellowstone is the most popular show in the history of that channel. And that's right now. It's in 2022. It's in its fourth season, third. I don't know what season it's in. And then 1883 is like the prequel essentially to Yellowstone. So you still have these like quintessential Western drama that where the protagonists are kind of the John Wayne of like the 21st century kind of figures, the Kevin Costners. And so that's what makes Prey really important. Like Prey is so fascinating because it's like it's a crossover. It trolls westerns with like the Last of the Mohicans music and like the sweeping panoramas from Last of the Mohicans, from like Dances with Wolves, from The Revenant. So it trolls like that Western genre of the representation of Native people, and then it also just trolls the Predator franchise. And so there's something, it's even though, right, it's not written by Native people, it's not written by Native women, there is, it's like punching back, I guess, against the popularity of these shows like 1883 and Yellowstone that are still very much like in the vein of those things, the John Western flicks of the early 20th century, and then like these other movies that are famous for representing Native people in these like incredibly stereotyped and racist ways. And so it's just like it has a lot of limitations, and like I said, I don't really think the movie needed violence against Native people. I also don't think the movie needed violence against like bears and like relatives. That really bothered me actually, watching Predator kill the bear, and then also watching Predator kill that wolf. Also, like, it's just a movie that a lot of Native people are going to watch. Don't have him like de-spine a snake, like especially like a rattlesnake. I was like, pow, 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 pow. As I was watching that scene, because I was like, this is when you need to take a page out of Rest Dogs, which is written by Native people, where they bleep out the owl face. Like, this is one of those moments where you're not supposed to portray shit like this on screen. If you know Native people are watching, this is bad. This is really bad.
They straight up assaulted my Dene comrades. I wasn't appreciative of that.
Yeah, no. The first time I watched it, I felt like I was like, oh my God, I just did something really bad. And then I fast forwarded through the scene because I knew it was going to happen the second time I watched it. But yeah, I don't appreciate like the gratuitous trophy, the sport killing of relatives, whether they were like human relatives that were Indigenous or like other than human relatives that are actually like incredibly sacred and important, like bears, by Predator in the movie. And actually, I don't think those scenes needed to happen in order for the movie to be very successful. I mean, it wouldn't have been a Predator movie, but
put Native people in the director's seat. Sorry, Elena, I interrupted you.
No, they just should have killed a few more French trappers, and that would have been okay.
Well, they were successful in killing all of them.
Yeah, it's true. although Naru did a few too.
There were a lot of those dudes too. There were like 20 of them. I don't know how many of them.
They just kept showing up. Like, it didn't look like there were that many at the beginning, and then they just kept coming out of the trees.
It's funny because they were like kind of cannon fodder also in the film, when like it's usually Indigenous people who are just like, shot off horses and stuff like that in other films. But I don't know. I thought it would be more satisfying to watch all those white men who don't wash their legs. Those men are dirty. Those men were very dirty. That was a very authentic representation of white supremacy at the early imperial frontier.
Oh my God. No, that's so funny, because when we were watching it the first time in Oahu, like the second that the fur trappers came onto the camera, like the whole room just like exploded with laughter. That's how silly they are to us.
They don't bathe, they don't comb their hair. In contrast, the Comanches were beauty pageant. Yeah.
She was literally brushing her teeth the next morning.
Yep, their clothes were clean, their hair was brushed, they looked,
After she got trapped in the muddy bog, she actually took a bath in a pond or a river. Like, God.
Arnold didn't do that.
So dirty.
Arnold just stinks.
Doesn't wash his legs.
There were scenes where no, I don't know. I was just like watching Arnold on screen, and I was like, wow, like this guy was a sex symbol, an icon. How?
I should have counted like how many muscle shots are in that movie, just like oily like muscle shots.
No, I didn't even realize that one meme where at the beginning where they do their like and it's all like it's all veiny and glistening. I was like, who's this for? This movie wasn't made for women. Like
Oh no.
This is so true.
Those movies
was-
are
it
totally
was-
made for men.
It was gay AF. Like,
Oily muscle shots. Like
In the movie-
late 80s. Like I
Yeah.
just have it was like a workout video.
Oh yeah, and you know what? I also too. They do the same thing to the female protagonist in the original that they do to Naru too. Just like punk her around, push her around, and in the end, she's I don't know. She wasn't really anything in that movie because it was built in a different time. Definitely of the times. This movie, I see that now, Melanie.
Yeah, and like something that Melanie said, it kind of just like a light bulb went off. Let's see if I can retrieve my thought for when Melanie was talking. But the fact that like Prey trolls previous movies made about Indigenous people, I while you were speaking, I was thinking about the ending where she brings home the head of Predator. And in movies like Dances with Wolves, Last Mohicans, or any sort of Western, the ending of the movie is always that Indigenous people will be extinct, or like they have no future. You know, and Last the Mohicans dances with wolves, like that's the thing they're running away from. Like that's their storyline, is like they're running away from like extinction. Or but with Prey, if we're thinking about Predator as like the future of like patriarchy, or like the continuation of like colonization, or what have you, whatever it represents to you, she like slays it. You know, like she puts an end to it, and it's a different ending. It gives us a different narrative of like, nope, like Indigenous people are still gonna continue. Yeah, like our stories are still gonna continue. So I just wanted to say that.
Are you saying our history is the future?
Oh my god! Now we're just trolling Nick.
So wait, Justine, are you saying that our history is a feminist future?
I think I am.
That's
The
so
future's-
true. Sorry.
No, absolutely. It is. The future's feminist. It's Indigenous feminism, too. Put Native women in the director's seat. And, you know, we're not capitalists here, but just watch all that money come through for you people doing these movies. Like, put the women in the driving seat for these things. The movie would have been way better. Native people would appreciate it way more. And just to circle back just a little bit, Melanie, because when that rattlesnake came on TV, I was like, reservation dogs would never do this to me. Like, we would have had a
Exactly.
censored rattlesnake in that.
Totally. And that actually would have been a rare moment of humor. There's very little humor in this movie either, which is also kind of like wah wah. It's a little too dude-ish. Like it just needed more humor. She had a little bit of like repartee with her dog. That was
You're
about
cooking
it.
next time. That was cute, but it could have been better.
There's only a few cute moments. You know what, Kylie, what you just said about like the ending of the movie, it's always like typically it's like Indians are headed towards extinction and they're trying to like prevent extinction. And this is what I really hate about the subfield of American history called New Indian history, that this like whole narrative of like Comanche imperialism came out of. I'm talking about like academic, like PhD, like Harvard, Oxford trained historians. Because I remember I took a class my first year as a master's student, and I was like, these books are bullshit, because all of these books are talking about how Native people had all these powers for a time, and then they disappeared. They disappeared and died after your book ended. So like I don't understand what this narrative of like Indigenous empowerment is that these white dude historians are writing, because everyone knows what the final chapter is. Everyone knows about termination. Like everyone knows about like the theft of land and like the completion of settler colonialism. So why are you making a big deal about like Native people had power too at one point? You know, this kind of dumb argument to like avoid talking about the ongoing structure of genocide and settler colonialism. Anyway, what I'm trying to say is that like I feel like this like indigenous feminist future that she represents is a future that's like about protection. It's about the future. It's about making sure that there's a future for her people. At one point, she comes back into the village right after one of her many like forays out trying to hunt the predator. And doesn't she tell the village to like move or something? She's like, we need to relocate. There's this, you know, this thing out there. Like she's actually concerned for her community. And the reason why she wants to go out and like kill predator is partly because she wants to be like war chief. She wants to prove herself to her people, but also like she's the only hunter in the entire movie who's motivated by like a care for her own people and like for her community. Like her mom's a medicine person. Like she also knows how to administer medicines to heal people and to help them. And so she's like a helper, right? She's a caretaker of her community. Predator's just out there to like kill whatever he can because he wants to be the apex. The dudes are just mostly out there to just, I don't know, they're arrogant, you know? They just want to like show their arrogance and their dominance. Like the fur trappers are just out there for, arrogance as well as just money. And she's the only hunter in the entire movie who's like a warrior because she's also trying to protect her people and to ensure that they have a future. And so I think that that's also something that's very different about this movie and like how the movie ends. And she's also passing it on, like you said, Elena, like intergenerationally to that little girl who looks up to her and all of a sudden is like, oh, I can be a warrior and protect my people too this way, even though I'm a girl. But she's actually, I thought this and then I got really goaded because this is like a very Navajo thing. Because I mean, the movie isn't about Navajos. I wish everything was about Navajos, but it's not. But she's a monster slayer. She's literally a monster slayer.
Yes, and sorry, now all of my like light bulbs are going off. But and in the movies that we've seen in the past, if we do have a future, it's always carried forward by a pretendian like white man, like Kevin Costner and Dancing with Wolves. What's that guy's name? Daniel Day-Lewis and Last of the Mohicans. He and so with this, it ends with like a woman, because like only a woman can carry our future forward, because like you said, Mel, we come from like caretaking, protection. We're not just thinking of ourselves, but we're thinking of like those after us. And yeah, so just all kinds of things. Like I really loved the ending.
Yeah, she is the only one in the whole, out of any of the characters who has a solely altruistic motive. Like she wants to protect her community, and she does it by herself with her dog, using knowledge that she gained not only from being a hunter and learning from her brother, let's say, but also from her mother.
She also does it in the most like calculated and like articulate way. Like there's several times where she holds back because and like the one time that she didn't hold back, like when she shot the bear with the arrow, like nothing happened, and or when she shot the gun, like nothing happened. But then it was like at the very end when she kills Predator, because like she's like built up this whole like very calculated way to get him, and she does it. And I was also thinking about the pace of the film in that way too. It was very like femme like centered. It was very like I'm laughing because I was kind of comparing it to how women versus men do sex. And because like in the original Predator, it's just like bah, 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 bah. Like Just like, it's like, whoa, what's happening? And it's just done so right in Prey.
Mic drop.
Final score 9 out of 10 sheep.
Yeah, final score 9 out of 10 sheep. And as Justine would say, finally a movie for me.
Finally a movie for me. No, for real though. Yeah, they really took care of you with the pacing. For a magnificent ending.
Elena and Kiley, final thoughts. How many sheeps? Did it change? Is it the same?
I think it went up. Originally, after I had watched it with everyone, I was like, nah, I'll give it a 6. But I think after now this discussion, I think I would give it like an 8. 8 out of 10 sheep.
I will go 9. I think 9 out of 10 sheep. Definitely. I mean, it hit 5 just because it had a female protagonist, but definitely 9.
For an overall score of 8.75 sheep. You heard it here first on RPH. 8.75 sheep out of 10. Not bad. Not bad at all. I'll take
would
that
have gotten
movie.
a 10 out of 10 if it had been directed and written by Indigenous women.
Absolutely.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
not been about Predator. What a loser. Predator's a loser. Hate that guy.
Just like any old regular dude. Just kidding.
Exactly. It's just a basic Predator is a basic ass man.
For real.
He's a shit ass.
He's a shit ass.
The
only reason why he has an advantage is because he has like the invisibility shield shit. It's like, please. If you weren't invisible, you wouldn't be able to do like 3/4 of what you do. Shit ass.
It's true. You know what's so funny? In that, so by the way, the video that I watched for the timeline, it came from this channel on YouTube called Screen Rant, and to keep track of all the predators, he was naming them like Chad and Chet, and like he called this one, I think he saw, and then Chet does this because it reminded him of exactly those people. Just trophy hunting, and it doesn't matter how much of an advantage you have, like you're still gonna call it like a win and a trophy. Whack, that's not honorable. What Naru did was honorable. That was honorable kill.
Hell yeah. She was honorable, had like true integrity through and through. It was beautiful. It was beautiful to watch. Well, I guess we're at an hour and 23 minutes. We did good. I feel like we covered all the bases. Is there any last burning thought anyone wants to contribute before we wrap up?
Just really quick, Justine had mentioned that we went on a delegation to Oahu. So I just wanted to say, shut down Red Hill, military out of the military out of Hawaii. Follow Oahu water protectors.
Olai Kawai. Water is life. Let's go. Y'all pay attention to Oahu water protectors and what they're doing out there. They're making shit happen.
Sweet. Thanks for listening, everyone. Like I said earlier, Elena and I are going to try to find a time to record a bonus episode about Dark Winds. If you join our Patreon, you'll have access to that. Go to patreon.com. You can look up Red Media. There's a bunch of different tiers for monthly subscriptions. Even for $1 a month, you can gain access to our bonus content. We'll be back in a couple of weeks. I'm not really sure what we're going to be talking about, but we'll be talking about something. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Kiley and Justine. Y'all kicked ass. Y'all rocked hard. All right. See y'all later next time.